Director General of the Office of Utilities Regulation here in Jamaica, answered P.E. Hewitt. Other OUR executives, team members, fellow regional regulators, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to day 2 of our exciting 2-day workshop, Unlocking the Power of AI, Shaping the Future of Utilities Regulation. Before getting into it, let's ask for guidance today, and I'll now invite Gordon Brown of the OUR to say a word of prayer. Gordon.
Good morning. Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. Let us just speak with our Lord God for a moment. Lord, our God, thank you for today. Thank you that we are able to speak in this manner despite the distances. Just like you, we can connect with each other. We can connect with you at all times because of your love and mercy. As we connect today, Lord, we ask that you guide us to do what is good for mankind, to do what is good for our neighbor, as you have taught us to love our neighbor. We thank you, Lord, and just ask that you bless these proceedings in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Gordon Brown of the Office of Utilities Regulation here in Jamaica. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't attend the first day of our workshop yesterday, you missed quite a lot. Leslie Lee Fook of INCUS Services in Trinidad and Tobago brought a powerful message about resilience and his journey to becoming a data scientist. His key takeaways were: be resilient, your current circumstances don't define your future. AI, he says, is not complicated. AI can make us more effective and more efficient. And he said yesterday, AI won't replace you, it's the people who know how to use AI who will. And we're glad he's rejoining us this morning for day 2. Also back is Professor Sean Thorpe, who made a wide-ranging, insightful presentation on the various considerations around artificial intelligence. It's time for a national task force examining this, according to Professor Thorpe. Today, he'll provide a local perspective, while Hudson Hollister of Age Data in the United States joins us, the panel this morning, to give an international view. But before they come to us, let's welcome, to bring opening remarks, an expert in his own right, our very own Leighton Hamilton, who is the OUR's Director of Information Technology and Risk. Leighton, good morning.
Good morning, all. Welcome to day 2 of our 2-day workshop on unlocking the power of AI, shaping the future of utility regulations. The theme of this workshop captures a vision where artificial intelligence holds the potential to revolutionize and define our regulatory landscape, probably the whole landscape of the world, not just regulations. Today we gather with anticipation, yet we find ourselves at the crossroads of innovation, skepticism as regulators. We have witnessed the potential and promise of AI in streamlining our operations, enhancing decision-making, navigating the path towards a sustainable future. Yet we approach this with a cautious perspective that stems from our role as guardian of ethics, fairness, and accountability. Yesterday, we talked about the ethics of any AI system giving out even personal data. The healthy skepticism is grounded in the genuine concern for data privacy and security. We question the resilience of AI systems against vulnerabilities and attacks, but we grapple with the implications of relishing some of our decision-making's ability of machines. We have seen where AI can be used to diagnose patients a lot quickly for certain diseases. So they are good, and they're also going to be bad with everything in this world. As we embark on day 2 of this transformative workshop, with the focus today on regulatory AI, we do so with the understanding that skepticism is not a hindrance, but a driving force that compels us to scrutinize, to question, to ensure that the promise of AI are met with cautious optimism. We have no doubt that AI, when harnessed effectively, can drive unprecedented progress and efficiency. Yet we must not forget the importance of checks and balances. They are uncharted territories, and we view this workshop as an opportunity for problem solving, improving our processes, and to learn more through case study, application, and demonstration. While we evaluate the pros and cons, ultimately arriving at a solution that serves the greater good. This workshop stands as a clear demonstration of the unwavering dedication and commitment of the Office of Utilities Regulation to raising awareness, driving change in the field of regulation, particularly within the utility sector. We are committed to promoting a clear understanding of AI and its influence on the engagement and compliance monitoring, prospective analysis, and more. We encourage you to full engagement and invite your questions at the conclusion of this session. With this, I extend a warm welcome to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leighton Hamilton is the Director for Information Technology and Risk at the Office of Utilities Regulation, and rightfully in his capacity, especially with oversight for managing the risk at the OUR and in the regulatory environment, he has said, healthy skepticism for AI, especially grounded in the concern about data privacy, because at the OUR, we're actively putting in place measures to ensure that we are compliant with our own Data Protection Act here in Jamaica. And now to bring greetings, we welcome Mr. Leslie Lee Fook, who is the Director of AI, Analytics and Automation at Incus Services Limited in Trinidad and Tobago, a company that provides cutting-edge AI analytics, automation, and cybersecurity solutions that helps organizations to adapt data strategies for data-driven decision-making. Leslie, welcome back again.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, everybody. We're going again to my Jamaican friends here. Where we left off yesterday, we had lots of great questions in terms of the AI Act, like legislation, regulation around all of those things. So I wanted to jump back off kind of where we left off yesterday. So how do we act? And we also spoke about chatbots. So how do we apply these technologies, as consumers of not from a regulator perspective, but as consumers of legislation and regulation? Like, how do we comply? So I want to put you guys in the position of you are your customer today. So this, for example, is a chatbot that we created that's trained on the AI Act. So we talked about that yesterday, and it's the EU. It's the first legislation that's been proposed globally that seeks to regulate and legislate artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of new stuff inside here, and just like GDPR, there's a very big chance that the rest of the world, their legislation will be modeled off of it. So what do you need to know? How do you interact with this stuff? Where do you get started as an organization? And how do you ensure that you put those safeguards in place to use AI? So this chatbot will actually help you with stuff like that. And I want you guys not only think about it from the regulated perspective, but also from the customer's perspective, right? So this is the chatbot itself. And guys, I'll ask some of my folks on the Zoom side to go ahead and use the chat. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to assist. But this is basically been trained on the Act itself. So we could start with, what is the AI Act? Cool. And it'll just describe the act. And I could start with stuff like, how do my company for AI? Oops. Yeah, so how do I prepare my company for AI? Data readiness experts, collaborate with experts, et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to give you all the intelligence around, preparing your organization so that you're compliant with the AI Act or further versions of it. As countries roll out their own versions, you can also do that here. So you can train it based on your local legislation. Next one I wanted to show you is something a little closer to Jamaica, something a little closer to home, and a project that we're working on. And I suspect you're going to see some of this stuff a little later on as well. But this is Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority. Their biggest challenge is that there are really complicated laws and multiple laws that exist that regulate the aviation industry. I'm sure the same exists in your own industries. So what we've found is that, people, consumers, customers, they typically, the level of jargon that exists in a lot of these laws is a little complicated for the average person, even like myself. So what they've done, they've trained this chatbot and they'll make it publicly available, whereas it's aware of all the legislation and it can distill that language into really, really simple language that you can utilize. So what can I help you with? So if I'm at the Civil Aviation Authority, I probably want to know, how do I apply for a pilot license? And rather than sifting through, my spelling isn't that great, guys, and that's perfectly fine too, because the bots are smart enough to detect that stuff. So, what is the process right now? Well, I'll have to scour their website. I'll have to download all the legislation. I'll have to sift through those things just to even understand a simple question like this. I pose the question to the AI. I don't even spell correctly, and it's probably going to give me a pretty accurate answer. So you'll see. All right, so to apply for a license, you need to meet certain criteria. You need to be 17 years old, class 1, class 2, great. Some might say, great, well, where do I apply? And guys, you see, like from a customer perspective, a customer service perspective, how impactful this stuff is, right? So you as a regulator, you can take your own legislation, you can put it into a chat, but you can train it. And now from a customer service perspective, you can serve the entire country or your customers 24/7 in really simple language, right? This is a really, really easy win for regulators. Last but not least, I wanted to show you a slightly more complicated but fun example. Any of you guys ever been in a vehicular accident or had to make an insurance claim? Like, how long on average does it take for an insurance company to pay out that claim? So this is the next project that we worked on, basically in the insurance space. So it's an insurance claims assistant. And what's actually happening here is that we've trained multiple AIs to work here. So the first AI, for example, is gonna, and if you guys want to use the chat and give me some examples, I'll happily pop the answers in here. But let's say Colleen got into an accident.
Oh.
Hi, Colleen. So our AI is now even personalizing that experience for us, right?
No.
So Colleen, help me out here. Tell me a little bit. Have you ever been in a vehicle accident by any chance?
Yes, I have.
All right, cool. So
Sadly. Yes.
sadly, unfortunately. So let me
But I
we go here.
survived.
I picked Otto. So briefly describe the experience, Colleen. Like what happened, the incident, what happened leading up to the incident?
Oh, well, we took an alternate route. I was coming from Linstead, Jamaica, and we took an alternate route through a place called Sligoville. So that's very steep. And there was this vehicle that swerved too deeply or too widely, as you would say. And we were almost ran off the road over a precipice almost.
Colleen,
we were stopped.
Colleen, I could only two finger type.
Two finger. Oh, you're typing it?
I'm typing it in as we talk, so I'm speaking to the chat. But
Oh,
so there was a
wow.
vehicle that swerved what?
It swerved too widely coming around the corner. So
too widely
we also
coming.
had to swerve to avoid it.
Okay. We tried to avoid,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then,
We ended up in a milepost. Well, we almost went over the precipice. The milepost stopped us.
okay, and then we hit a milepost,
Yes.
right? So this first AI will act as a almost a claims agent. It'll accept the information the same way that you go down to the office, you fill out a form, you know, you have to go complete those things because the process is generally that, right? You go, you complete a form, a handler takes the information, the handler passes it to an adjuster. So this is the first part of the process where a handler is actually taking the information. So I just put all those things in. We took an alternate route. Oops, it's saying, hey, hope everybody's okay. So it's also demonstrating a level of empathy with your customers, right? Cool. So when and where did it occur, Colleen?
As I said, Sligoville on my way from Linstead, St. Catherine in Jamaica.
Okay, I'll just put St. Catherine because that's all I could spell.
No problem. St. Catherine.
All right, St. Catherine, Jamaica.
Yes.
All right. Were there any other parties involved in the accident?
Yes, my friend who was driving and her daughter.
Okay, so those are all right, almost. So now you could upload like proof, right? So you could upload pictures of the accident. You could upload different like a police report, all those documents, etc.
Okay.
I'll just upload this. This is like a bill, but it could act as anything. The AI would now read and interpret all of those things. Have you reported this incident to the police or any other authority?
We had to, yes.
Yes. Cool. As a good citizen would. Right? And the witnesses, you said my friend was driving.
Yes.
And
of course, well, the other car and the passengers that were in it.
okay, cool. Plus the other CLs. All right, cool. So my friend was driving, her daughter was also in the car, plus the other vehicles, passengers. What was the estimated cost of the damage?
I have no idea.
No clue. All right,
No
let's
clue.
see. All right. All right. Have you previously reported this claim or taken any other steps? Nope.
Well, what was
You
that?
didn't report it to anybody else. That's okay. Right, so this
spoke about it with other people, but in terms of reporting it, that was to the police.
Okay, beautiful. So this is the first part of it. So the first AI is going to collect all that information and then they hand over to the expert. And the expert is now going to review all the information. And the expectation is it's going to ask you questions, ask you to provide more evidence, more proof, so that immediately, because how long does it take to get paid out from a claim? Weeks, sometimes months.
I have no idea.
Yeah, weeks, sometimes months, right? So now it's going to summarize what you just said. It said, hey, okay, now passing to the claims adjuster. So this is a separate AI that is specialist in handling the claims. So we submitted all the information, and rather than going back home and then waiting for a call 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, a week later to say, submit more information, it's going to ask you that information right away. So I said, hi, Colleen, thank you for your detailed account on the incident. I understand you were unfortunate to be involved in an accident on your alternate route. Right? So you see how much emotional intelligence the AI has, like sometimes more than most people. Strange. The swerving vehicle that came around the corner frightened you, and in an attempt to avoid it, you hit a milepost. How are we doing so far?
You're doing
Does that
great.
sound about right? Yeah. This must have
indeed.
been a distressing situation for all parties involved. I wanted to reassure you that we're here to help and make this process as seamless as possible for you. How many of you guys freaked out already? This AI is nicer than most insurance people I've met in my lifetime. So I'd like to start with a few questions to better understand the circumstances. Can you please tell me more about the sequence of events leading up to the collision with the milestone? Did the situation adhere to traffic rules prior to the accident? Were you speeding? Were you doing anything strange? Were you adhering to rules?
Are you asking me that? Listen.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell me what. And
We were
the
not
AI will dig
speeding.
deeper.
The oncoming vehicle was the violator.
Okay. Right. We were in the right.
Yes, we were.
All right, let's see what it says now. So now it's going to take that information, it's going to drill a little deeper, and the outcome is looking for is to figure out how can I get this sorted out immediately and then pay out the claim. So I'm sorry to hear about the other vehicle, Colleen. That must have been quite a distressing for you all. You mentioned this incident has been reported to the police, right? Could you please provide some specific information or even a police report? So it's now asking for the police report showing that driver of the vehicle was violating the traffic rules, right? So you claimed that the other person was in the wrong, is asking you for the police report to prove it or to validate it. Also, the other damages to the, and now is asking about the damages to the other vehicle. Guys, you see how intelligent these systems are. So why I wanted to share this, guys, is not specifically about insurance, but specifically about, one, how can I give it the intelligence to serve my customers? How can I make it better, smarter, faster, so that my customers' outcomes could be achieved in a much shorter time? And I hope I was able to do that with the AI Act, the civil aviation example, as well as the insurance example. Cool. So for those of you guys that are interested in digging deeper into the regulations, into the legislation, I'll be publishing this AI Act chatbot, and you guys can get access to it. If you want to access it, just pop me an email. If I could, this probably won't get any chat, but guys, if you want to circulate my email to the attendees, happy to open up access to the chatbot for them so that they can better prepare their organizations for the legislation around the use of AI.
Will do.
Is that cool?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie. Leslie Lee Fook is from Incus Services in Trinidad and Tobago. And now to introduce our first speaker for the morning, I now invite our OURIC coordinator, the coordinator for our OUR Information Center, who's also our information officer, Colleen Mignot, to introduce Hudson Hollister. Colleen.
Thanks, Liz. So, ladies and gentlemen, our first presenter for the topic of the day, regulatory AI, compliance strategy, and customer engagement. He goes by the name Hudson Hollister. He began, he began his career as a securities litigator at Latham and Watkins in the United States and has a law degree from Northwestern University. He's founder and CEO of H-Data, a technology company which uses analytics and artificial intelligence, AI, to automate regulatory work, starting with the energy industry. His customer base includes the nation's largest utility and pipeline companies and 5 state governments. The H-Data platform ingests regulatory data and creates analyses and models which change automatically as new reports are filed. He founded the nonprofit Data Coalition, which actively pursued efforts to transform many government reporting regimes from disconnected documents into open and standardized data. Previously served as an attorney at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and on the staff of the House Oversight Committee. Without further ado, I welcome the H-Data man of the moment, a company I know he is truly proud of. Welcome, Hudson Hollister.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you so much for the enthusiastic welcome. Thank you especially for the prayer that began this session. Director Hamilton, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be presenting to the Office of Utilities Regulation. My name is Hudson Hollister. I'm the founder and CEO of H-Data. As Colleen has described, H-Data works on managing and understanding regulatory information for the utilities industry. We currently operate in the US, and we have some interesting conversations happening around the world. My intent for this conversation, however, is not to promote H-Data, but instead to seek to describe the cutting edge of generative AI, especially as it relates to utilities regulation, which is our specialty. I'm going to begin by describing a bit of my background in order to help provide some context. And then I'm going to show you a basic use case in generative AI. We're going to jump right into one of the use cases that we're working on at H-Data. And then I'm going to back up. I'm going to describe how we got to that point and the technologies that were put into it. At any time, I'm always watching the chat. on our Zoom conversation here. So at any time, I'll be watching that to see if questions arise. So feel free to raise questions in the chat, or if you have a different procedure for questions, feel free to run that instead. I started HData 3 years ago because I wanted to solve a problem that I had encountered as a regulatory lawyer. As many of you know, across, and as Colleen just described, across all sorts of regulation, not just utilities regulation, regulation has been a matter of documents, not of data. My passion for this began when I was an attorney at the Securities and Exchange Commission in Washington, D.C. I served as an attorney at the Securities and Exchange Commission during the 2008 financial crisis. I discovered one of the reasons why the Securities and Exchange Commission failed to apprehend the systemic risk that led to the financial crisis. The failure was a data failure. All of the reports from public companies in the US and from banks and from financial firms, 600 different types of regularized reports. These reports were all flowing into the Securities and Exchange Commission as documents, not as data. As part of my job, I performed a study of what the Securities and Exchange Commission was doing to review and understand these regular reports from public companies and banks. We had 500 attorneys and accountants working at the headquarters of the Securities and Exchange Commission in Washington. Those attorneys and accountants were reviewing the filings manually. They were manually checking the mathematics of financial statements using a calculator. They were manually creating summaries of the filings. This is why the Securities and Exchange Commission, a few years before that, had missed the famous Enron fraud. It was why the Securities and Exchange Commission had failed to detect the famous fraud perpetrated by Bernie Madoff. And it is also why the Securities and Exchange Commission missed the indicators of systemic risk. I resigned from the Securities and Exchange Commission and I went to work on Capitol Hill in order to try to force my former colleagues to adopt digital structure. I resigned from Congress in 2012 to begin the Data Coalition, and in 2015 began working with the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to adopt a data structure for the annual and quarterly reports by U.S. regulated utilities. In 2021, the FERC adopted the XBRL digital format for all of the annual and quarterly reports that are filed by regulated utilities. Beginning in 2021, every regulated utility in the United States began reporting all of its information using this structure. This means that every number on every schedule of every annual and quarterly report has its own data field, enabling instant digital analysis of all of the subject matter of these forms. That was the beginning of the data store that the FERC set up, and it was also the beginning of HData's business. HData now maintains structured and unstructured data around utilities regulation for the United States. You might wonder why I have been discussing structured data when really the application of AI, which is our conversational point today, the application of AI is not about structured data, it's about unstructured. As you've seen in some of our conversations so far this morning and yesterday, generative AI is capable of ingesting large quantities of unstructured data, such as a document or a blob of text, or even a whole file, and then creating prose that responds to queries pertaining to that text. Why then have I introduced our conversation discussing structured rather than unstructured data? Well, the answer is that ultimately generative AI will be able to handle both. You'll be able to use generative AI not just to answer questions about the text, not just to create summaries, but also to perform the analyses that you need. Generative AI is not just a creature of unstructured text. Ultimately, generative AI will be a creature of structured and unstructured content, resolving and automating many of the manual computational processes that we currently have to pursue in order to undertake utility regulatory tasks. I'm going to give you a couple more details about HData we currently serve much of the US regulated energy industry, 11 electric utilities, 8 oil and gas companies, 5 consulting companies, including Ernst & Young, and 4 state governments. Colleen, I know you told our group that we serve 5 state governments. The government of North Dakota has left us, I am sorry to say.
Okay, that's
It's all right,
sorry.
We'll get them back, and there are several others that we're going to begin working with. This is recent. Some of our customers include some of the larger utility companies in the United States, including Southern Company, Exelon, and NextEra. The 4 state governments that are currently using the HData platform are Georgia, Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming. I'm going to spend the next few minutes jumping ahead to show you the current capabilities of the system, and then I'm going to show you the architecture of the system. So I'm going to pull up the HData platform and offer a quick and easy analysis. I'm going to share my screen again here. And afterwards, I'm going to go into more detail about the design considerations and methods for generative AI and regulatory research. As I'm logging in, I would love to answer any questions about the difference between structured and unstructured data in utility regulation. And if there are none, I'm excited to bring up a few of the some of the basics of the regulatory AI that we have already created. Our first goal when we built regulatory AI was to make it very easy for our customers to analyze the text-based documents that U.S. regulated utilities must file with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I'm going to pull up the most recent annual report from Georgia Power Company. I suspect there are many similarities between the annual reports filed by U.S. regulated utilities and the annual reports filed by Jamaican utilities with the OUR. These reports are lengthy documents. They include financial information, and they also include operational information. Utilities report their income, their balances, they report their profit and loss. They also report on some of the generation and transmission and distribution statistics that govern their business. I'm going to access the most recent report from Georgia Power Company, submitted in April 2023 from Georgia Power Company to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I'm going to use the regulatory AI capability to query that report. I'm going to click on our librarian, and I'm going to ask regulatory AI to summarize this document. In a moment, the next thing that we're going to do in our conversation after this is I'm going to show you the technical architecture that makes these queries and responses possible. And so don't worry about the process right now, but in a moment, we're going to get an answer from regulatory AI summarizing the document. If the analysis takes a while, one of the reasons for this is that we are pre-processing the document. The pre-processing is very important. It's what allows regulatory AI to provide its analyses. And I'm going to show you a diagram in a few minutes of the pre-processing. It's still working on it, and so we're going to move right to our technical architecture. Here's what I want to emphasize, and I'll return back to the analysis in a moment. One of the most important aspects of the platform, and I think of any generative AI application to utilities regulation, is that you've got to begin by pre-processing the documents. We create chunks of our documents in order to make it easier for regulatory AI to ingest them. We call that process chunkifying. We divide all the documents into chunks, and we plug the chunks into our database. This is important because if we were to just simply feed the entire text of one or more regulatory documents into the platform, ChatGPT or any other licensed large language model would not be able to handle that document. The volume is too great. As I'm going to describe, chunkifying the source documents is important for other reasons as well. Chunkifying supports so many capabilities that are crucial, that provide certainty and understandability for our customers. For example, chunkification allows us to provide citations. Chunkification allows us to provide not just citations, but also to prohibit hallucination as our customers use our platform. Are there any questions about the chunkification process or the need to pre-process the subject matter documents as we dig into what we call regulatory AI? Any questions about that? Hearing none, I'm going to continue. I'm going to get you our screen share back. After the pre-processing, we apply the following workflow in order to answer a user question. In order to provide certainty for users in the regulatory sector, we first we receive a question. The question always relates to a certain subject matter. It always relates to source documents. For example, in the analysis that I'm showing you, we pulled up the most recent report by Georgia Power Company. We add the conversation context into that question. We then access the database and we grab only the relevant chunks from the source document. We don't grab the entire source document. We only grab the chunks that are seen to be as relevant. That allows us to reduce the strain on the underlying large language model. It also allows us to provide some of the key design considerations that I'll be talking about. We use
Hudson?
Go ahead, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a question in the chat. Tell me at what point I can throw the question to you.
Fire away.
Sorry. Okay, so Peter Johnson is asking, can you identify the report language reader level? I'm not sure. The report language reader level. That's what I'm seeing here. For regulatory AI.
Don't know the terminology. I will explain that when we chunkify the source document, we chunkify the source document on a case-by-case basis. And so in an annual report like the annual report from Georgia Power Company, we would usually chunkify by the paragraph. But this may vary depending on what the source document is. We had to invent a chunkification engine in order to divide regulatory documents into relevant chunks in such a way that the chunks are useful depending on what the underlying source document is. Does that answer the question?
He's also asking about the depth of the analysis.
The depth is variable. I think the easiest thing here for me to do would be to, well, I'm going to pull my screen share back up, and I'm going to show you what we're doing with the Georgia Power Company analysis. Here we go. Okay. All right, I pulled up that Georgia Power Company annual report and I typed summarize this document, and here's the answer. The document discusses the financial report of Georgia Power Company for the year 2022 Q4. It includes notes to the financial statements, important changes during the year, obligations incurred as a result of issuance of securities, changes in franchise rights, acquisition of ownership in other companies, purchase or sale of an operating unit or system, etc. It also discusses the company's participation in the cash management program. Now, I think Peter has asked about the level of detail. The level of detail can change. We've got pre-built buttons in order to do that. Here's one of our pre-built buttons: rewrite this answer, but make it longer. So I've just asked regulatory AI to provide more detail than previously provided in response to my query. One of the reasons why we were able to produce this summary, again, is the chunkification process. If we had not previously divided Georgia Power Company's report into chunks, we would be unable to do this because the volume of this multi-100-page report is just so great. There's more to the chunkification process, but I want to start with that. I want to start with the ability to summarize. Any questions about the chunkification process? Now, I previously raised a different query. I asked for regulatory AI to summarize the topics mentioned in this document. Summarize the topics mentioned in this document. And the answer to that is the document discusses various topics related to financial statements and accounting policies, and it provides a numeric list. And I've also got an answer to the most recent request I made: summarize this document, rewrite this answer, but make it longer. And you'll see that I have now received a longer summary of the report from Georgia Power Company. We started with a short summary, and we've now proceeded to a longer summary. It explains the notes to financial statement section, the long-term debt section, the important changes during the year, and footnotes. We have this ability, again, because of the pre-processing. I think you'll see this quite often as the utility regulatory sector begins to use generative AI. We happen to use ChatGPT underneath our processing in order to create the answers, but I think we don't compete on the large language model. The area where a company seeks to compete is in the pre-processing, in the quality of the chunkification, the quality of the rewrites, and the quality of the information that we feed into the large language model. So I think you'll be seeing that quite often as the AI industry matures. The large language models, for the most part, are going to commodify. Everyone will be subscribing to the same 5 to 10 large language models. Everyone will be subscribing to ChatGPT or to Bard, which is offered by Google, or to Anthropic, which is offered by Amazon. And what matters is the workflow that we put together that allows the users in our specific industry to get their work done. I'm going to describe a couple of the consequences of chunkification now. One of these is the fact that because of chunkification, we do not see any hallucination. Let me ask, who is Colleen Mignot? Question mark. Colleen, what do you think it's going to say?
I think it's going to say it doesn't know me.
It's
unknown.
Apologetic. It's going to apologize first. I'm sorry, but the information provided does not include any details about a person named Colleen Mignot. If you had asked ChatGPT without any workflow or structure or pre-processing, if you had asked ChatGPT this question, it might invent a fake person named Colleen Mignot and create a whole life for you. It's important for our platform, or for anybody working on generative AI and utilities regulation, it's important for us to avoid hallucination because we do not want any fake information. In regulation, we need to work with the authoritative documents. We need to work with the official documents filed by utilities or the official dockets published by regulators. And so we want to avoid any fake information being pulled in. For this reason, this is another reason for us to have set up the chunkification process. We create the chunks, identify the relevant chunks, and we send only those chunks to the ultimate embedded large language model for the answer. We also dial the, as you probably know, large language models, when you subscribe to them, you can set their creativity. We dial that creativity all the way down to 0. We do not want creativity. By providing only the relevant chunks and by dialing the creativity all the way down to 0, we avoid hallucination, and we get the regulatory AI librarian to admit that it does not know who Colleen Mignot is. There is another, yes, go ahead, yes. Did we have a question? Oh. I'm going to next. I'm going to describe one of the additional key possibilities for regulatory AI beyond just avoiding hallucination is the concept of citations. We have this conceptually. We've not yet built it in the HData platform, but it's one of the aspects that our users in utility regulation are most enthusiastic for. The concept of citation works like this. You issue a query. The query is answered by regulatory AI, and we provide the basis for the query's response. We take the chunks that our machine determined were relevant to the query, and we rank the chunks in order, showing which ones were used to generate that answer. In this visual here, we have 3 different chunks. We have a good reason for the answer, we have a not so good reason for the answer, and we have a strong reason for the answer. Our next challenge as we develop regulatory AI is to bring these chunks together into the user experience so that it becomes possible for an answer generated by regulatory AI to provide a highlight for each of the phrases that was generated using chunks, and then to provide a link directly back to that specific chunk. It might be a paragraph or it might be a sentence of the source document. The pre-processing allows us to organize this citation capability, and we use the citation capability in order to provide certainty for our users. In a minute, I'm going to begin describing the frontier that we see in terms of, first, I'll talk about some use cases that we're working on, specific users in the utility regulatory space. And then I want to finally discuss the possibility for using artificial intelligence, not just to generate unstructured prose, but actually to do structured analysis. Before I do that, I would love to find out if there are any questions about the capabilities that I've shown, or about the specific considerations that I've discussed so far. In particular, avoiding hallucinations and allowing for citations to the source document. And I think I see some questions in the chat. Yes, Christopher Bryan. If an employee takes a personal interest in my private affairs and breaches my trust, I have a right of action against the employee. What would I do if that employee is an AI? Well, I would hope that we are able to avoid that future. And I think my answer for Christopher is focused around the security that we build into regulatory AI. We are not intending to provide a platform that can access any personal details. In fact, the access that regulatory AI has to regulatory information, it's limited. It's limited to the libraries that we have set up, and it's limited to the uploads that our customers have chosen to make. Let me show you a bit of the structure of our libraries, and after that, I'll ask answer Yvonne's questions following. Here on the in our catalog, you'll see here that we have. I've pulled up the Georgia report right now, but I'm going to move back to the library. There we go. I'm going to hit the refresh button. And I've got to wait till it finishes loading in order to be able to navigate. There we are. Oh, I've lost the share, restoring the share. You'll see here in answer to Christopher's question, we've got my catalogs and we've got more catalogs. Within my catalogs, we've got FERC reports. We have preloaded every filing by a U.S. regulated energy company with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission into our catalog. This means that any report or any group of reports can be queried using regulatory AI. We have also provided our users with the ability to upload whatever documents they want. We call this the private documents catalog. The private documents catalog is protected. H data is not able to see the documents that our customers have uploaded. But in answer to Christopher's question, the only documents that regulatory AI has any access to are the ones that are included in the catalogs. Regulatory AI does not have any ability to access any other information. Instead, we keep it tightly walled off. We do send the queries to the underlying embedded large language models. After, as you saw in the workflow, after we chunkify and we rewrite the answer, we then send that the compilation of the query and the chunks, we send that to the embedded large language model, and the embedded large language model responds. And so that large language model was indeed trained on a vast corpus of information from the internet. But we do not provide our instance of regulatory AI with access to anything else. That is how we prevent the sort of circumstance that you're describing from occurring. I want to ask if I successfully answered Christopher's question, and then I want to move to Yvonne's question. Christopher, does that make sense so far? And do you have any follow-up? Yvonne has asked a question about how AI can be used in data collection in the area of complaints handling for a regulator. I've got a couple of different answers for that, Yvonne. The first is that it's possible for as I was describing, to use a private catalog to upload any document and approach it using regulatory AI. For instance, what we're seeing here is a compilation of all of the documents that my team at HData has uploaded into our own testing version of regulatory AI. For instance, here is a rate schedule that was submitted by Montana Dakota Utilities Company to the North Dakota Public Service Commission. And I can use regulatory AI to ask questions about that document, just as I did before for the official Georgia Power annual report with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so what I recommend, Yvonne, is if you were to have a compilation of complaints, you could upload that compilation of complaints to your AI platform, and you could use AI to explore those complaints. You could, so for example, I've just asked for a summary of this application from Montana Dakota Utilities Company. And here's the answer. This document is an application filed by Montana Dakota Utilities Company to the North Dakota Public Service Commission. The application requests approval to establish a new gas rate schedule for the recovery of costs related to the expansion of natural gas service, etc. The document also mentions an initial upfront payment required at the time an application requesting the installation of a service line is signed. The document also includes details about the company's plans to construct a new natural gas distribution system and town border station in the summer of 2024. And I could further query this. I could say, what does Montana Dakota Utilities Company say about Kindred expansion surcharge rate 76 ? And it will pull up more details. And as that is answering, Yvonne, I'll just say, you could put together your own compilation of complaints. You could also set up generative AI to automatically summarize every complaint coming in. You could set up generative AI to automatically summarize all the complaints that come from a particular complainant if you've got repeat complainants. You could add generative AI to your case management system if you've got a case management system that is handling your complaints. Here we go. I asked regulatory AI, again, we're sticking to this specific document, this application for an expansion filed by Montana Dakota Utilities Company. And I asked, what does Montana Dakota Utilities Company say about Kindred expansion surcharge rate 76? And it says, Montana Dakota Utilities Company is proposing a new rate schedule, Kindred expansion surcharge rate 76, for the recovery of these costs. And it explains the components of the rate. Any follow-up question from Yvonne? And if not, it looks as though, oh, great, another question from Peter. Peter asks, the chunking process seems to be a critical process. Yes, the chunking process is the most valuable thing we've got. How is chunking verified? That's also a very good question. We verify the chunk. We demonstrate the chunking process through citations. Whenever the chunking process. Oh, great question from Nicole. We've got energetic questions here. I know not all of our audience can see them because when I see the questions, they're just sent to the host and panelists. And I'm curious if nobody minds, it would be nice to have the whole question visible to the entire audience, because that way you could see my backlog that is increasing as these questions come through. Peter has asked, the chunking process seems to be a critical process. How is chunking verified? The answer is that happens on the back end of our system. I suspect that as this industry matures, different companies are going to compete on the quality of their chunking process. And again, this is because the large language models are going to commodify. ChatGPT and Bard and Anthropic are going to be, I wouldn't say they're interchangeable, but I would say that the way that we have of subscribing to them is pretty similar. I could remove ChatGPT from my system and replace it with Bard, and our users would probably not notice very much difference. And so what matters the most is the workflow that we build around, the structure that we build around those underlying large language models. And chunking is the most important part of that workflow. And so it's necessary for us to be really disciplined about the chunking process. We don't have an external verification of the chunking process the way Peter is asking, but we do show through citations that specific chunks are used to create a specific answer. And Nicole has an amazing question. How does the AI decide how to rank the responses? Well, the answer is that we have to add a probabilistic assessment to the ranking in order to figure out which chunks were used to create the answer. We have to evaluate those chunks using the underlying large language model. And so that means we ping the large language model again in order to evaluate the underlying chunks. And then we create a probabilistic assessment based on the content of those chunks, which chunks are most likely the answer. So it's almost as though we take the relevant chunks, we rank them, we use AI again to rank them. I think one thing that's becoming clear here is that we use the underlying large language models multiple times in order to provide the service that we provide. We have the workflow, and the workflow involves chunkification and avoidance of hallucination and citation, manages all those things, but it is utilizing the embedded large language models multiple times, not just once. The large language models are used several times in the process in order to provide the end result. These are some very good questions that everyone is asking. So my thanks to Peter and Christopher and Yvonne and Nicole. All right, my next topic, I'm going to move a bit to discussing some of the specific examples of generative AI and regulatory research. The first of these, I've got three of them. The first of them is oversight. The second of them is jurisdictional analysis. And the third of them is knowledge management and transfer. First is oversight. I think the example that we are sharing already is a good use case for that. Regulators receive a very large volume of documents from the utilities that they regulate. For example, this specific document that I've already been sharing from Montana Dakota Utilities Company might be very lengthy. It might be hundreds of pages long. And so in order for the workforce of the utility regulator to manage the workflow, it's very helpful to start with a summary and with a comparison. Just to organize further, all of these commands can be typed out in English, or you can click on the shortcut button. I've just asked Regulatory AI to show me the dates and timelines mentioned in this document. Now, it's going to process that request, and here are the dates and timelines mentioned in the document. This is one of the questions that those who are using Regulatory AI for oversight, this is one of the questions that they use most often, because very frequently in a submission from a utility to a utilities regulator, one of the first things you're going to need to know is the basic structure of the dates and timelines that are contained in whatever the content is. And so here, Regulatory AI has pulled out the dates that pertain to this specific submission from Montana Dakota Utilities Company. The date filed is August 28th, 2023, is mentioned multiple times. There's another filing date. It's December 21st, 2021. That's most probably the previous filing to which this one updates. Effective date, this pertains to service rendered on and after July 1st, 2022. There's some other timelines that are mentioned. There's no specific date mentioned for the notification requirement, which is item 4 here, but it is brought out in the answer. For discontinuing gas service, customers need to notify the company during regular business hours, 1 business day before service is to be disconnected. And then finally, there is another deadline. There's a preceding 12-month period for reconnection of service. This is a scan by Regulatory AI of all the chunks that have dates and timelines, and then we've received only those chunks and we've answered those questions. So this is a good example of oversight by a regulator using generative AI. The second of my 3 use cases is jurisdictional analysis. We've begun working with Exelon, which is one of the larger utilities company in the United States, in order to receive updates from multiple state-level jurisdictions in which they operate. Exelon has asked us to bring the dockets published by state utilities regulators into our platform. When I shared my screen earlier, I'm going to share it again, actually. When I shared my screen earlier, you may have noted that we have 2 options currently for the users of Regulatory AI. We have the FERC document catalog, the FERC report catalog, and the private documents catalog. You'll see that there are more catalogs that are also available: FERC dockets, SEC reports, state dockets. Exelon in particular, and several of our other customers are very interested in getting access to multiple state dockets from the state level utilities commissions in the United States, and then being able to analyze those state dockets in a single query. What this means is we will be able to bring out comparisons between similar regulatory actions across multiple state dockets at once. You might have one utility company operating in multiple jurisdictions. You might have rate cases filed in multiple of those jurisdictions. You might have the same intervenor participating in the rate cases of the multiple jurisdictions. Exelon wants to be able to determine what the similarities and differences are in the rate case filings, maybe by the same utility company in multiple jurisdictions, or the similarities between intervenor testimony across those multiple jurisdictions. It has been impossible up until now, due to volume and due to the manual nature of regulatory work, it has been impossible to quickly understand the differences, the jurisdictional differences that might occur in submissions by the same entity, whether it's a regulator or an intervenor across those multiple jurisdictions. Regulatory AI can solve that problem. So that second use case, jurisdictional analysis, that's driving some of the enthusiasm that we see from the regulated utilities in the United States. I should also mention that jurisdictional analysis is important for our state regulators in the US. This is because it's very frequent for a US utility regulator, for a state level utility regulator, to be dealing with a utility company that also operates in other states. For example, Wyoming deals with Sierra Power. Sierra Power also operates in Idaho. Wyoming wants to very quickly understand the representations that Sierra is making to the Idaho Utilities Commission. Regulatory AI can provide them those insights very quickly. And I believe I see some additional questions in the chat. Nope, I don't see any questions. Is my audio okay? I think I'm being asked if yes, Colleen, everything is good. Thanks so much for checking. Yeah. The third of our use cases for generative AI as it exists today. So the first one was oversight. The second one is jurisdictional analysis. Oh, great question from Nicole, has just popped up in the chat. For the first of our use cases is oversight. The second of our use cases is jurisdictional analysis. And the third of our use cases is knowledge management and transfer. And before I talk about knowledge management, I'm going to answer Nicole's question. Nicole asks, how long does the chunkification process take, and to essentially train the AI on a particular submission? Oh, very good question. The chunkification process takes a few moments to a minute. If I were to upload a document to my catalog, then I might see how long it takes. So actually, I'm going to take a bit of a leap, and I'm going to find a document from the OUR, and I'm going to download that. And I have found it. Let me share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. And we're gonna test how long the chunkification takes, and we're going to test it on an OUR document. I'm going to find the one that I've been looking at. It'll take me a moment. And I know that I've found it once before. Yes. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. I'm pulling up the Office of Utilities Regulations 2014 to 2019 rate case submission from JPS. I'm going to download that to my own system. The download has begun. And then I'm going to move to my private documents catalog, and I'm going to upload that. And we're going to see the chunkification process happen in real time. I'm going to upload from my downloads folder. Here is that document. I'm going to open it, and it is going to, I'm going to give it some tags. We use the tagging system in order to help our customers and manage their work, so that you can pull up a tag and you can see all of the documents that relate to that tag. I'm going to hit the upload button, and it will take some time to upload, but here it is. Here is the JPS 2014 to 2019 rate case submission on the HData platform. And I have just uploaded it, so it has not been in the regulatory AI system up till now. And I'm going to ask a question of it. Now, in this case, to answer Nicole's question, chunkification has to happen on the fly because my system has not seen this document before. And so the summary may take a bit longer, but we'll see the quality of the chunkification from the answer that we receive in response to my request to summarize the document. And it'll take a moment. I think Colleen had another section of the question, and so I'm going to try to find that on the Zoom. Or Nicole, that is. Well, here's the answer. The answer is, the document is a summary report of the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, JPS, 2014 to 2019 rate case submission to the Office of Utilities Regulation. The report outlines JPS's proposed changes to its tariff rates and structures, which include an average increase of 21% in residential tariffs, a new tariff designed to restrict increases for residential and small commercial enterprises consuming at the lowest band, and the introduction of a wholesale rate for its largest customers, etc. The answer for Nicole is that the system had to chunkify on the fly in order to handle the upload of this document from the JPS, from the Jamaica Public Service Company, because the system was unfamiliar with the document. And so you saw chunkification happen very quickly in order for regulatory AI to be able to answer this question. But there's another aspect of Nicole's question. Nicole was asking, how long does the chunkification take to essentially train the AI on a particular submission? And this is another interesting part. We have not trained regulatory AI on this particular submission. Instead, we are relying on the large language models that we subscribe to. As I mentioned before, we subscribe to Microsoft OpenAI ChatGPT, we subscribe to Google Bard, we subscribe to Amazon Anthropic, and those large language models, they are trained on the entire internet. They are not trained specifically on utility information. The important thing that we do is we test our chunkification process on utility regulatory information. We're always trying to improve the chunkification process in order to make sure that the needs of our users in the utility regulatory industry are met. And so although we have not ever trained this specific, we have not trained any models on this specific document, and we will never train any models, ours or anybody else, our process or anybody else's. We will never do any training on what our customers upload to their private catalog. Training does not happen here. But because we have optimized our workflow and the chunkification process to handle utility regulatory information, we get a pretty good summary. I've got a follow-up question from Nicole. How can regulatory AI be used to help with monitoring? Is there a way to cross-reference across multiple submissions by utility? The answer is yes. I'm going to give you an example of pulling up two documents and providing a comparison for them. So I'm going to go back to my library, and I'm going to pull up two different FERC reports. I'm going to pull up from two different companies. I'm going to pull up a report from Alabama Power Company, and I'm going to pull up a report from Georgia Power Company. I'm going to filter by Form 1, that's the annual report, and I'm going to select multiple of them. I'm going to select the most recent report from Georgia Power and the most recent report from Alabama Power. And I've now got multiple documents selected. So let's get it going. Let's summarize the documents. I just want to make sure that it's properly understanding them. You might notice that I use the summarization question a lot. It's just because I want to make sure that we're in the document doing the things we need to do. And then I'm going to ask for a comparison. And I think that might help us to answer Nicole's question. Once we've gotten that question answered, I want to tell you about some of the future capabilities that we see for regulatory AI beside what is possible now. It'll probably take a minute for us to do this. Here we are. The request is to summarize the financial reports of Georgia Power Company and Alabama Power Company for the end of the fourth quarter of 2022. And so this is a summary of both documents, and I'm going to now ask for something comparative. Nicole asked, is there a way to cross-reference across multiple submissions by utility? Let's say, what is the difference between Alabama Power and Georgia Power? And let's see what it comes up with. Nicole, your question might have pertained to multiple submissions by the same utility, and we use the same workflow to do that. We could bring up multiple reports or submissions by one utility. In my case here, I've brought up two different submissions from two different utilities, and so that use case is a little different, but it's the same process, the same workflow. And it's going to get me an answer. And while we're working on that answer, I'm also going to begin pulling up some details for the final phase of our conversation, which is the future of regulatory AI for the utilities industry. I'm going to log into a different aspect of our platform. Please bear with me as I handle that login. Okay, yeah, there we go. Here is the answer. What is the difference between Alabama Power and Georgia Power? The answer that regulatory AI provides is as follows. Alabama Power and Georgia Power are both subsidiaries of Southern Company and operate in different states, Alabama and Georgia respectively. They both provide electricity to residential, commercial, and industrial customers in their respective regions. However, there are several distinguishing factors between the two. 1, service agreements. Both companies have agreements with Southern Nuclear for nuclear-related services. However, for Georgia Power, this also includes construction management. Number 2, power purchases. Both companies purchase power from affiliates through the Southern Company power pool, but the amounts and costs associated with these purchases may vary. Number 3, natural gas transportation agreements. Both companies have long-term interstate natural gas transportation agreements with SNG, but the transportation costs under these agreements differ. Number 4, joint ownership. Alabama Power and Mississippi Power jointly own Plant Greene County, where Alabama Power operates, and Mississippi Power reimburses Alabama Power for its proportionate share of non-fuel operations and maintenance expenses. Georgia Power does not have this arrangement. Revenue. The revenues of both companies differ. In 2022, Alabama Power had a total operating revenue of $7.8 million, while Georgia Power had a total operating revenue of $11.5 million. Actually, I've got that wrong, $7.8 billion, because it's 7,817, while Georgia Power had a total operating revenue of $11.5 billion. Equity investments. Alabama Power has an equity method investment in SecGo, whereas Georgia Power does not. These differences are primarily due to the different markets they operate in, the specific agreements they have in place, and the different resources that they manage and utilize. And so in answer to Nicole's question, we are able to pull up multiple documents, and then regulatory AI can figure out the differences between them. And here, regulatory AI has gone through and given us a 6-point list of the major differences between the annual report from Alabama Power and the annual report from Georgia Power. I see another question from Christopher. Christopher says, my question was only partly answered. Here is an example for clarity. I've had regulators refuse to even process my complaints based on their personal feelings, so my complaint didn't make it into the system to begin with. What do I do if that is done by an AI, and who will be held responsible or liable? Well, my answer for Christopher is that the regulator's obligation to process a complaint is the same regardless of whether the processing is done by a person or whether a processing is done by an AI. And so typically there are rules that require a complaint to be received. Usually there is some sort of freedom of information request that provides details on how the complaint was received. However, the policies of a regulator also allow the regulator to some discretion in how it is to handle a complaint. And so if the regulator is within its rules in processing the complaint, then there is no recourse. It all depends on the regulator's internal rules on how a complaint is to be processed. But this does not differ depending on whether a person or generative AI is processing the request. The regulator's obligations to the citizens and the regulator's fealty to its own rules remain exactly the same. Generative AI does not change that. I hope that answers the question. All right, I'm going to move toward the final phase of our conversation. I would like to give you an idea of where we see regulatory AI going in the future. And for this purpose, it's important to recall one of the visuals that I shared very early on. When we look at regulatory information, we look at both structured data and unstructured data. The structured data includes all of those places where there is an individual data field for every number or every piece of information in a form. Unstructured are the documents that are simply PDFs or blobs of text. So far, we have been focusing this morning on the application of generative AI to unstructured data, but that is not where history is going to wind up. Instead, we have an opportunity for AI to help us both with structured and with unstructured data. In order to give you an idea of this, I'm going to quickly show you what we do with structured data today. I'm going to pull up the interactive documents window of our platform, and I'm going to show you why the structured data matters today. I'm going to pull up an annual report from Alabama Power Company. And unlike the regulatory AI technology I showed you, this solution gives us the ability to do quick analysis. Here's the balance sheet from the annual report of Alabama Power Company for the calendar year 2022. You see these orange outlines on every number. Every number is clickable. Every number is interactive. I can pull up a number and I can see the history. Here is the history of Alabama Power's utility plant line item. You can see that it goes up from 20 billions in 2010 to 34 billion in 2022. I can benchmark Alabama Power Company against anybody else. So here's a quick benchmark of Alabama Power Company against Georgia Power Company, Mississippi Power Company, and San Diego Gas and Electric. Now, so far, there's no AI here at all, folks. There is just computation. I've been able to use the underlying structured data in order to pull up a chart and a graph in order to do a comparison. And I could create formulas based on this. I could track the return on equity of every utility because we have structured data. However, what gets really interesting here is the future of applying regulatory AI to this sort of work. And I'm going to show you what we are planning for the future. We are going to not just bring citations in, we are going to bring structured data analysis and unstructured data analysis together. We are doing this with a technology called the Group Manager. We're going to use regulatory AI to allow our customers to select groups of utilities based on pros. Here is the sort of unstructured query that we will be able to answer with both a structured and unstructured response. In this prototype of our platform, the user has said, show me a list of companies whose names start with AL and had a 2022 net revenue greater than $2 billion. And here's the answer. Regulatory AI has come up with an answer. There are two utility companies whose names begin with AL and had a 2022 net revenue greater than $2 billion. They are Alabama Power Company and Alaska Electric Light and Power. Now, here in the middle of your screen, we have surfaced a structured query. We used the AI to create a structure. It's a SQL query. It goes into our database and it finds every listing of a utility where the name contains AL and where the net revenue line item, utilizing this digital structure that I provided for you, where the net revenue line item is greater than the amount that is described. This means that we have, excuse me, I've got to go to the same thing here. This means that we have allowed regulatory AI to provide a response that is both structured and unstructured. This further means that AI will be able to automate the process of numeric analysis as well as summarizing documents. You'll be able to ask HData, please build me a table of the return on equity of every utility. And regulatory AI is going to be able to build you a table using the structured data numbers that exist in the underlying database. Combining unstructured and structured analysis of regulatory information is the future of utilities regulation. It will allow us to magnificently save time that is spent on manual computation and allow the professionals who work on utilities regulation in order to spend time on the things that require brain power and that require their expertise and experience. One of the questions that we often receive while discussing the combination of unstructured and structured queries is that we are often asked if there are concerns over what this might do to the expertise of professionals in utility regulation. I think that we can be optimistic. The work that we are saving is the computation. The work that we are saving is data retrieval. The work that we are saving is data entry. These are not skills that a professional in utilities regulation should be expected to invest. We want professionals in utilities regulation to understand the concepts and to use their judgment. We don't need them to be spending time wrangling data. Regulatory AI solves those problems. I would love to ask if there are questions from our crowd about the combination of structured and unstructured analysis in generative AI. Any questions? All right, I know that we are close to the end of our time together, and so I'm eager to figure out if there are other areas where we can be helpful as we try to understand the present of generative AI in utilities regulation. and its potential future. If I were to summarize our hour together, I think I would summarize it as follows. I would explain that the important aspect of applying generative AI to utilities regulation is not so much the models. It's not so much the specifics of ChatGPT. ChatGPT and Bard and Anthropic, they're all commercially available, and they're going to commodify, just the same as cloud hosting has commodified already. What matters is the workflow that you build around them. And I showed you some of the workflow that we've built at HData, but I do hope that you'll investigate the workflows that are built by other AI companies. So that's the first important takeaway. The second important takeaway is that as technology stands today, generative AI can make life easier for those that work in utilities regulation. You saw that we were able to very quickly compare Georgia Power and Alabama Power by simply accessing the annual report from Georgia Power, the annual report from Alabama Power, and asking regulatory AI to describe the differences. We also were able to pull up the JPS document that was filed with the Office of Utilities Regulation, and we were able to have regulatory AI understand and summarize it quickly. Much of the value that we currently provide by applying generative AI to utilities regulation is that we are able to quickly summarize, understand, and recapitulate content from very lengthy documents. And then finally, the future of AI in utilities regulation is a future of combining structured and unstructured analysis. We can bring computation together with query response. And by bringing computation together with query response, we can resolve many of the greatest time sinks for the professionals who work on utilities regulation. We are excited to be on this journey with the utilities regulatory community. And I'm very honored to have had the opportunity to spend an hour with colleagues from the Office of Utilities Regulation. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention, and blessings on your day. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Hudson Hollister. I mean, that was a lot of information. Certainly, I learned about chunkification. Didn't know about that one at all. And yes, I like where we're going in terms of the future of AI, and especially regulatory AI, and combining structured and unstructured data analysis. Very, very useful, very important information. Hudson, please stick around. I'm sure there are questions that will be coming up more as persons absorb more of your content. And as we head into the next presentation, and then I'll hand over to Colleen to introduce our next speaker. Colleen.
Thanks, Liz. Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to your screens as we welcome again our very own Professor Sean Thorpe. Now, we met him yesterday and he's back today to share with us his wealth of knowledge, experience, and understanding on the subject matter. He's Sean Thorpe, Professor, as I know him, and Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Computing, and immediate past head of Computing and IT at the University of Technology, Jamaica. He holds a PhD and MSc and BSc degrees in Information Security and Computer Science from UTEC, University of Westminster, London, and the University of the West Indies. He's past president of the Jamaica Computer Society and 2009 recipient of the Fulbright Visiting Faculty Scholarship Award to Harvard University, where he conducted collaborative research work in cybersecurity. He's a 2014 University Presidential Research Award Fellow at UTEC and recipient of the American National Science Foundation Award for Research in Cloud Computing and Data Mining. He volunteers as Program Chair for the Institute of Electronics Engineer, IEEE, Security and Privacy Conference in the USA, and has been Senior IEEE member since 2017. He also serves the Association of Computing Machinery, ACM, speaking to us on the topic of the day from his perspective, regulatory AI, compliance, strategy, and customer engagement. We give you again, Professor Sean Thorpe.
Thank you for having me again, Colleen, and a pleasant good morning, everyone, all protocols observed. I particularly liked Hudson's presentation. I think I just found my next assignment to give my students for the upcoming semester, if I can put it that way. So a pleasant good morning, everyone. So for what it is worth, the whole space of regulatory AI is increasingly interesting by virtue of where we see the industry going. Just to note, regulatory AI is really a part of a branch of a wider area called regulatory technologies, or what we describe as regulatory tech. So, as we move through this presentation that I'll do this morning, is to really take a sort of a local perspective on where I see the opportunities presenting themselves, and very specifically looking at options for how we engage the area of regulatory AI in our own local spaces. The whole issue of regulatory processes, if carefully defined, is really looking at rules or mechanisms by government, established by government, to oversight and monitor specific industries or domains. So, for example, we have electricity, we have water, we have transportation as examples that our own OUR has to have oversight for. Very specifically, within the context of regulatory AI as applied to our spaces, there are some key components to pay attention to. And looking at Hudson's presentation with H-Data, you'll find that it is actually providing some of these core components and applications, from data analysis to risk assessment and alert notification that it provides its particular stakeholders. So if we are looking for wide-scale adoption within our ecosystems regionally, you would want to ensure that these key components and applications are duly observed. The ability to provide predictive analytics, taking a large chunk of data as you would have it, and historically being able to use that data to come up with trends and analysis based on the trends, is really a future proofing of where the technology is going, which is starting off from where Hudson left off in his presentation this morning. This is where exactly we need to define the use cases in terms of how our local ecosystem should be performing. If you recall yesterday, for those who were with us yesterday, you would have seen the entire conversation spinning around the whole need to do natural language processing. So similar to what you saw with H-Data this morning, similar to what you may have seen me doing with ChatGPT and BART, the concept of natural language processing is really embedded into supporting conversations with the machine to provide the type of informed responses that you need. The data relating to the files that are being picked up are parsed for useful understanding and supported in a regulatory context to provide to the stakeholders who need to use such data. And as we'll see shortly, there are various stakeholders of the use of the data, not only the regulator, but all its customers who have the need for understanding and interpreting the various regulations. So clearly put in our context, regulatory AI will support efficiency improvements within our ecosystem. Regulatory AI, very specifically, will automate some of those traditional mundane tasks that may usually be had. And let's be frank here, we're living in a society where you have zettabytes of data. I mean, normally when you would have school in Jamaica, you hear persons talk about kilobytes of data, megabytes of data, then they start talking about petabytes of data. You now have zettabytes, which is really order of magnitudes of data, which is so difficult to quantify. Now, chunkification of such data, we'll have to take it off in blocks, coming from Hudson's presentation. But the underlying idea is to have efficiency improvements in terms of the routine tasks that you may have with respect to the regulatory processes. It also is very important through efficiency improvement to reduce the overhead on time, pertinent to regulatory compliance. And that has to be a part of the high priority focus of the issues when you think about efficiency and improvement. That's the kind of outcome we have to be looking for here locally and across the region. Accuracy and consistency for sure, because I did contend to you yesterday that the technologies do still have an element of bias or margins of error. Whilst that is so, the objective is that over time, the AI should consistently apply the various regulatory rules to the likelihood such that the human errors are reduced, minimized, and the interpretation and enforcement acknowledged based on those errors that may occur. The timely detection of non-compliance. This is another key one. Many of the things that you are doing in terms of using regulatory AI, if you're comparing documents as it relates to coming up with an understanding of what the various regulations are suggesting, the context for an end user of such systems is to timely detect non-compliance, or what I describe as outliers. And hence, based on those outliers, you can provide early intervention and some form of prevention before it's escalated in particular circumstances. I do have a few use cases that I will also share. But as I continue the conversation about the importance and the benefits of the regulatory AI for us here in our ecosystem, is cost savings. Automation and AI-driven analytics can lead to significant reductions in costs by the regulatory bodies, or to the regulatory bodies and the associated organizations that actually are subject to such regulations. It is not to suggest that manual labor is not important, but where manual labor can be better optimized, it reduces that manual labor component against the resources in that particular part of the ecosystem. It means the OUR and all other related agencies that are benefiting from the regulatory actual processes here would have optimization on human capital that is placed in these resources. Enhanced risk management. This is another key component, where you can use the AI close to real time, if not real time, to support, understanding the various risks within the enabling organizations that have to adjust for this compliance will be very crucial. As a matter of fact, it's a great strategy, because if you can enhance risk management, you reduce the likelihood of risk, and at the same time, ensuring compliance against those levels of risk. It should never be understated as well that transparency and reporting are key components of how AI-generated reports should manifest themselves. So the reporting outcomes are such that you and I need to be able to trust what it is that we are seeing coming out of these processes. Looking at age data, the idea is that over time, trust is built pertinent to what reports it provides to its stakeholders. And hence, in our own context, the same is always going to be true. This in of itself, by way of transparency and reporting, will ensure that you have better communication to the stakeholders, because stakeholders really trust what actually comes to them in terms of relevant, factual, and complete data. The scalability is another key component of the regulatory AI locally in terms of how we should be looking at it. The solutions can scale to handle complex regulatory environments, very large volumes of data, as we saw in the first presentation this morning. We have the same type of concerns locally in terms of the scale that we would want to also be continuously monitoring. So hence, the AI is an advantage in this particular regard. If we think about this in qualified terms, and we say challenges and considerations, I couldn't emphasize enough yesterday the importance of data privacy and the need for handling sensitive data. It's very important that if you're using the AI tools, it is capable of flagging if you are actually moving in a space of data which is personal identifiable data that it should not be having access to, because that in itself is actually a breach under our own data protection laws. So handling sensitive data requires robust privacy and security, which has to be a metric, of the regulatory AI toolkit that is provided to the public. Equally important is the need to also pay attention to the AI modelings that are complex. I'm quite aware that Hudson indicating that for his system, there's no concern or worry, at least on the front end, about the models themselves and the complexity of the models. But in the back end of these tools, that process has to be well understood, clearly interpreted, and broken down such that whatever regulatory decisions that need to be explained in the language context of the society and the group of persons who need to appreciate that is well understood. Let me say that again. Interpretability within your own jurisdiction is a crucial element as it relates to the application of these AI models. We can't understate nor overstate the fact that ethics plays a key role in terms of the responsible use of AI. The argument of putting in AI ethics seminars, workshops in the workplace, and of course in the educational institutions, providing this to ensure that we engender a sort of an awareness with respect of the public in terms of understanding the large-scale adoption of the AI. Then there's also the indication of regulatory adoption. So regulations themselves need to adapt to accommodate the use of AI. This is a very important thing. And in doing this presentation and preparing for it, the legislation that sits before us, and as it continuously is reviewed, and I heard Leslie with it this morning, the incorporation of AI as a part of the legislation is to treat with some of the concerns on the existing or traditional legislation that will ensure that with time that we will see that regulations must reflect the state of the technologies of the time and are so aligned so that there's at minimum compliance at all junctures. Human oversight can also not be understated. The AI may automate several tasks, but human oversight is often very, very necessary and sufficient as a part of the decisions and the fairness parameters. This speaks to the fact that we are suggesting that the AI augments the process for the customer service environments in which we are providing the regulation. It also indicates that as a part of the workforce development in entities like the OUR and all the entities that are beneficiaries to the regulation, that the workforce development will demonstrate the need for upskilling in AI, such that the persons who have to relate with this on a daily basis will have that higher order cognitive element as it relates to treating with the fairness arguments that are being put forward. Now, the applicability of regulatory AI to our OUR, for example, has a couple of key features that I've looked on very carefully. Very specifically, the area of grid monitoring and predictive maintenance. It is very useful, to have regulatory AI support things like the health of your electric grid. When you think about the fact that you need to do predictive maintenance on the grid and provide performance monitoring in real time on those grids, and you can determine points of failure and mean time between failure and response on a grid. If we have the use of sensors and data analytics connecting back to the regulatory AI tools, we can detect large-scale anomalies if they are, or small-scale anomalies, albeit it will help us to manage and understand the type of maintenance, particularly when you're trying to predict equipment failure. This is really a proactive type of approach, I believe, from where I sit in applying the regulatory AI, because by so doing, it allows for us in the larger ecosystem of how we operate in this country and across our region, which have common boundaries, is to minimize downtime, ensure grid reliability, and reduce that overall operational cost in the particular space. It is also important to note that by way of application, demand forecasting and resource allocation is a very big deal coming out of this type of application. I can see where the use of AI algorithms can analyze historical usage patterns, including weather patterns, to predict future energy demands. You and I might be very aware of the fact that with climate change and the Paris Agreement, where there's a global mandate to reduce, the carbon footprint that is around us, the application of AI algorithms to understand those usage patterns can help us better appreciate the future energy demands of the grid, for example, in the electric utilities that we have in our region. Regulators can use this information very specifically to allocate the resources that they have on the ground. They can then use it to ensure that utilities meet the required energy needs of their customers while minimizing waste. And I think all of us who are here from the region can relate to that one very, very well, right? Billing and rate analysis is another key element there. We can also relate to that very, very well. The application of regulatory AI to automate the analysis of utility billing data is something that I think has very strong opportunities in our space, given that we must be fair to ourselves to realize that there are complaints from time to time in this particular domain that we would really love to address and improve that customer stakeholder analysis. Checking things like bill accuracy and identifying discrepancies, verifying that the rates comply with regulatory standards are just but a few of the thoughts that I think we should have in mind to support these outcomes. The automation in of itself will streamline, significantly the auditing processes and somewhat put in place a framework, an auditing framework that will allow and enable fairness for customers who use regulatory AI services. Again, as I said, regulatory AI falls within the broader space of what people describe as regulatory technologies or regulatory tech. As it relates to consumer complaint resolution, and this is why I'm saying in the context of our region, this is a significant reference for where we can have clear use cases and application of the same. The chatbots powered by AI can handle customer inquiries and complaints efficiently. That's what we should be striving towards. I'm seeing since the pandemic a significant uptick in these spaces and a lot of investment by companies, including academic institutions like mine, by way of actually simulation and tools, designs, will demonstrate that in the years to come, that the chatbots will have a key role as virtual assistants to support consumer complaint resolution. So an AI-driven chatbot can provide very prompt responses, track issues, and escalate particular complex case queries that may not be able to be handled quite easily by the chatbot itself. In other words, you may have to pass those from the bot to a human agent as may be necessary based on the complexity of the case. But the more simpler cases that are well noted in this particular space can be handled by the bot, and then the advanced cases treated by the human agent. So this type of enhanced customer feature through the bot actually will provide satisfactory support to the type of resolutions needed in this space. Then there's the whole area of regulatory reporting and compliance, That's another key feature. If you use the regulatory AI to automate the generation of those regulatory reports, you can do some of that cross-referencing that I heard earlier in some of the conversations in this presentation that were being raised. It can easily cross-reference the utility data with the core regulatory requirements, ensuring the compliance with the underlying standards that are there. This in essence will reduce the administrative overhead, specific to the utilities and the regulators as a part of the non-compliance that you could have coming out of this process. Grid optimization, energy efficiency is another key element of the application here of the regulatory AI. I particularly love the fact that you can use the AI to drive the algorithms that optimize the grid observations, or grid operations, I should say, rather. I was currently looking at some new project opportunities, one of them being in the electric vehicle space and the vehicle to grid charging, which is a part of the electricity grid, where this has a significant option of a use case. We have a mandate to go EV based on a new draft policy that is there that will, once ratified, the country will also have to handle EVs on our roadways in significant numbers. So we have about a 10% climb per year that is expected. But I started looking at that, and saying, well, hold on. We already have existing issues on the electric grid for optimization and energy efficiency. Well, it is also going to be particularly important when we adopt electric vehicle services onto the grid. And I'm sure the OUR has already been thinking about that, because that's a part of our local ecosystem that it will impact in a significant way. In essence, by grid optimization through using the AI regulatory algorithms, this will help to balance the supply and demand and reduce some of that energy waste. And this we will definitely need as a part of the overall grid efficiency. It's counterintuitive and it's counterproductive to talk about using the use of AI tools and not recognize that we need to be using it for full optimization. If it is not providing optimization, then it literally defeats the purpose of its application. Data analytics for informed decision-making by management and by the service offerings provided by the regulatory bodies and those who are in receipt of said regulations. We will contend that there's a large amount, there's a large corpus of data. There's a large corpus of data specific to utilities, for example, and the need to uncover the insights coming out of that data can inform not only regulatory decisions, but it can also inform policy decisions. Because remember, regulatory processes are also built on policy, on monitoring mechanisms, etc. So this is useful. The regulators can make data-driven policy choices, as I'm suggesting here, and you can allocate the resources accordingly and respond to the changing trends, right, or the emerging trends in the utility sector that you are actually supporting. I hope I'm quite clear so far. And I know while I make this presentation, I will accept questions probably near to the end, but I want to give you a full picture of what I see the local ecosystem needing to be doing as it relates to the adoption. So the environmental impact assessment is another key element of this conversation. If you have regulatory AI, you can assess the impact on your overall utility operations. And that overall assessment on your utility operations can range from monitoring things like emissions, water usage, and other factors. These are some of the needs that we have in terms of how regulatory AI should be addressing our local ecosystem, which is why I said at the start of my talk, I'm seeing so many new projects that students in the area of computer science as well as engineering have to be working on in the year ahead as a part of the response, the national response to some of these particular issues and concerns. So outside of monitoring emissions, water usage, ensuring the utilities can comply with what is required in the environment as a part of the regulation. I think of NEPA when I think of that sometimes. This, of course, will promote sustainability and responsible resource use or utilization management as a part of the same. Now, fraud and security detection is another feature that we have to pay attention to. This is a problem we grapple with in this region. AI can identify the irregularities because based on pattern analysis, we can also identify anomalies or outliers, call it outlier detection. Outlier detection is the same thing as irregularities in utility transactions and operations. And this will significantly help to minimize the rate of fraud and, of course, uncover or unearth the various security breaches that you may be having in this space and be able to transparently report them. Automated monitoring system can basically raise those alerts and trigger the required investigations closer to real time as it relates to these suspicious activities that are detected. So clearly, from what I'm saying so far, which I'm sure might be a mouthful to many of us, there are significant local points of reference, or I would call them information or data points, from which the applicability of regulatory AI is very, very, very useful. There's also the need for public safety and monitoring. AI systems can monitor your utility infrastructure, for safety concerns, such as gas leaks or electric hazards. Yes, you can use it to do that as well. And hence, we have to step back in our overall thinking or rethink in terms of this engagement to pay attention to these things. Rapid detection and response to prevent accidents. I heard Colleen mentioning earlier her own situation with an accident that she had. Generally speaking, public safety is a significant concern in our ecosystem. If we can use the regulatory AI to do detection and response to minimize and prevent, I don't even want to say minimize, but to prevent, which is the desired goal. This will significantly do a lot for public safety. So hence, when I think about it, the regulatory AI has several use cases. And I sort of typify one or two in a moment. Importance of compliance in utility regulation is also critical. It is not reasonable to say that we have the regulatory AI, demonstrating different levels of customer satisfaction. But as it relates to you, the regulator, and the regulated, there is a mutual understanding that must be had as it relates to compliance. So when we think about things like consumer protection, compliance with regulations ensures that utilities provide safe and reliable services. The AI can play a major role in that. The AI can play a major role in fair pricing as well. Now this is where someone will say, Professor Thorpe, you're sure about that because you did indicate at the start of your talk that AI in of itself and the agents actually have biases, and that is true. But if you seek to minimize human error, which you and I will agree, there are different margins of human error, and it may be deliberate or inadvertent, right? the idea is that if we want fairer pricing mechanisms, we can apply the regulatory AI to support some of those fair price mechanisms as use cases as we see here. So regulatory rates to prevent things like price gouging and maintain affordability for consumers is a big deal. And we want to ensure that these utilities can cover at the same time their basic operational costs while earning a reasonable return on investment. I will contend, you see, that the adoption of the technology will minimize the capital expenses for how we run regulation and regulatory services. You will have a recurring operational cost to drive the technology, but maybe way lower than the capital cost. And outside of that now, what you're going to find is that, you know, by virtue of the customer on the as the end user benefiting from this regulatory technology, you can at least significantly consider ways to improve the pricing mechanisms in this space. This is really greenfield, new space for us in our region. It needs to be outside of this presentation or set of presentations over the 2 days. We really will need a further set of conversations and deep dive into these particular concerns. Then there's a whole space of environmental conservation. You know, regulations often include environmental standards, as you and I know. And, you know, this is primarily aimed at minimizing the impact of the utility operation on the existing environment. So compliance that will help to reduce pollution, conserve natural resources, and promote sustainable practices is a significant, if not one of the number one requirement of government and the policies that they have put in place. And the Office of Utilities Regulation, by use case applying regulatory AI for compliance and legal concerns, this will play a very key role where that is concerned. Then when we think carefully about grid reliability, utilities in our ecosystem here in the Caribbean must comply with these reliability standards at all stages to ensure a stable energy grid. Now, non-compliance can lead to power outages, etc., and disruptions that will impact the business community and just the individual consumer on a whole. So this is without saying. And I say all of these things to suggest that by virtue of inserting regulatory AI, it will help to improve that overall compliance and legal aspects that we actually need to be having as a part of this overall ecosystem that we provide. Clearly, safety, as we have said before, but safety at the level of providing regulations critical to protect your workforce, your consumers, and the general public at large against things like leaks, gas leaks, electrical hazards, and water contamination are undoubtedly without question. Safety standards must demonstrate that at scale. Investor confidence and economic stability. We are here having this conversation, very, very important conversation. It may be a very hard conversation, but it actually is a very important one. That by using the regulatory AI, it will seek to provide compliance and legality to same in many of these regards. So how can AI then be used as a part of tracking and enforcement of the compliance? I said all of that to really say this. You can now put in place automated data monitoring mechanisms within your utilities. The AI objectively would be used to continuously monitor and analyze that utility data and detect the anomalies and when you have deviations from the norm, you know, relating to the regulations. It will alert the regulator to potential compliance issues in real time and allowing for prompt investigation and corrective action or solutions. Now, text analysis and regulatory text analysis is a very big deal. H-Data's example earlier was quite demonstrative of that, probably without even saying it. Natural language processing by virtue of regulatory text analysis can parse large chunks of data such that the OUR librarian regulatory AI system can parse and analyze that data. Colleen can then pass that on as regulatory documents and legal text to the various stakeholders that need them. It helps the regulators. Just a minute, let me make sure. Just 1 minute, my camera. All right, so as it is, what I'm finding is that you can actually use the automated AI for significant regulatory text analysis. This is where actually I am going to focus some of my students in one of their upcoming projects, because we do have a course that embeds natural language processing. We have never looked carefully at the OUR text data, but we have been looking at large corpuses of data. So I started letting the secret out of the bag a little bit early. But regulatory text analysis is a big area. It will significantly help the regulators to stay up to date, given the rate of evolution on various regulations, and ensures that the utility companies in particular can adhere to the latest standards. So this is an interesting challenge and opportunity at the same time that we can embark on in our ecosystem here. By the same token, the application of AI can aid in tracking and enforcing compliance, from predictive analytics to audit automation. Two big areas, you and I will agree. So if we can use it in predictive analytics to minimize the rate of compliance risk, we can manage the rate of compliance risk in the future by virtue of the historical data and trend analysis. That data collection process, sanitizing that data as required, or sterilizing that data so it can be used for that predictive analytics, is going to be very important. The regulators can then proactively address these risks and take the necessary preventative measure to avoid the violations that we see pending. So audit automation in the same context is significant, is that it can automatically extract the relevant data to produce those required reports. This, in my view, will reduce the administrative burden on the regulators and allow them to focus on the deeper analysis and decision-making as the regulator, right? So it takes them out of the mundane transactional type operation and then use the outcomes from what the AI is tracking and enforcing under compliance to do deep analysis and decision making. Documentation and records management, I see some allude to that was suggested earlier in the first speaker's presentation. It is a very significant thing, very, very significant. How we use the AI to track and enforce compliance based on documentation and records management is critical. The accuracy and the organization of such records as a part of the utility compliance is a big, big deal. It will ensure that the documentation is readily accessible to regulatory inspections as may be required, as well as audits. By extension, it can move that information into regulatory reporting coming out of such documentation and records management as supported by the AI. So what we are seeing then is that the AI can in fact automate generations of regulatory reports time and time over, ensuring that the utilities will always have an accurate and timely reporting framework to provide the regulators. That's really what I'm saying. And the reduction of the risk relating to the reports will improve the type of transparency needed by our own local regulators that are here. The benefits are significant. The benefits are significant in terms of this. And it goes without saying that with time, I would say not only as a professor, but as an evangelist of where I see the AI adoption going. These are some of the things I want to see happening in our ecosystem regionally. And it can be done. It's going to take a team effort. It's going to take a significant team effort, but this particular event over the last 2 days is a starting point, and I'm using it also as a call to action for those kind of outcomes. So let's do a deeper dive in terms of what I'm saying here. Enforcement actions are also a very key integrator into the AI tracking and enforcement compliance framework here. Using the regulatory AI for enforcement action. By virtue of the regulator using the AI, it can identify patterns of non-compliance and then know what is the decisive action it must take and prioritize those actions. That currently exists as it relates to many things that the OUR, for example, has to do, but prioritizing has to be well managed, where prioritizing can now be optimized by virtue of using the AI in a significant way. Clearly, it will help us all to allocate the type of resources needed for investigations and the type of breach penalties that need to be applied. So enforcement action and timely enforcement action, transparency and accountability is a key element. I must say transparency and accountability helps us to build trust in any system. So where the AI can promote in a significant way an audit trail of the various regulatory decisions and actions. This in of itself will ensure that the regulators, right? It will ensure that the regulators, for what it is worth, will provide data-driven insights, enhancing accountability in these spaces. Customer engagement, this is a big deal. Big deal. Customer engagement is an ongoing and interactive relationship between a company and its end users. And if the company is going to maintain the type of branding and brand loyalty to support, the various omnichannels that it may have, it is crucial. It is very, very crucial that if we can apply the regulatory AI to customer engagement, as I was suggesting a minute or two ago, it will build trust and foster significant loyalty for businesses in our region long term. So here's an in-depth exploration of customer engagement in context. We build trust, and we build trust as a foundation of customer relationship management. By virtue of this engagement, customers will genuinely believe, right, that there's transparency as it relates to their business. When customers feel that, they will significantly care more about the needs and concerns of the brand of the organization. Let's call it customer advocacy then. It is not simply that they will want to trust the utility because they think they can only trust the utility when it gets fair pricing and so on. But there will be those unwavering trust and loyalty, and I call that customer advocacy. Fostering loyalty through a mechanism that supports the customers being significantly assured over time that their interest is being served by the quality of service that they get goes way beyond mere transactions with the utilities, for example. All right, it will significantly go a far way in providing valuable feedback to all stakeholders concerned here. And that two-way communication streak in terms of persons listening and having that feedback and the inquiries will ensure that with time, customers' opinion will be such that they feel that those opinions are properly addressed in that particular space. Then there's a whole concept of personalization, which seems like a natural spin-off. One of the things about artificial intelligence is this ability to build what are called loyalty recommendation systems, or what are called personalized recommender systems. I didn't talk about that yesterday. Personalized recommender systems. Well, here we go. Customer engagement using regulatory AI, very specific to us, and I can easily argue that it's a global measure of good customer engagement, is the ability to have personalization with your different customers. We have 3 million citizens in Jamaica, for example, and if you can provide a one-on-one customer experience that you may not have been able to do before, before the AI, now you can leverage the AI to do so, right? This also improves the customer advocacy or the emotional bonding that we were speaking about. So yes, it's going to enhance the customer experiences clearly in terms of the start of a customer journey becoming a stakeholder with a company, say for example, these utilities, for the entire life of that customer, which could be a lifelong or until exit, but at least it will enhance that customer experience for what it's worth. If you don't have enhanced customer experiences, customers leave brands as big as they may be. When customers have positive interactions at various touch points, they are more likely to view the company favorably long term. A customer-centric approach. So all of this, is piggybacking on the fact that if we apply the AI carefully to the business model of what we are doing with the utilities and the regulation, these are net positive outcomes that I'd expect to be seen. Feedback and improvement, where there's a whole space of continuous improvement. You will support clearly that the type of opportunities by using the regulatory AI to address the issues, identify and address the issues, will foster improvement based on the products and services that the utilities have to offer, and hence meeting customers' expectations. I probably use the word advocacy too many times already in my presentation, but it doesn't hurt saying it one more time. Retention and advocacy through customer engagement, from what I'm seeing here, is going to be a definite way forward for driving the customer experience through the application of the AI and the engagement. So outside of measuring that trust and loyalty, which interestingly, there are ways to measure it, because if you apply regulatory AI, we can have a system that ties the regulatory AI outcomes to things like a business net promoter score, or customer satisfaction score, or customer lifetime value measures. These are all parts of the metric, for how you actually track. So I heard earlier in the talk, persons talking about monitoring. But if I took monitoring to a granular level, the application of regulatory AI should be tied to the fact that we can, in fact, build out net promoter score systems and customer satisfaction systems and customer lifetime value measure systems to better appreciate what we mean by customer trust and loyalty. Well, clearly, the long-term success based on trust and loyalty, based on the brand coming from the utility, will harness and promote in our local ecosystem a very competitive market for how our regulators can operate. So in summary, customer engagement is necessary. It is not just about transactions. It is about nurturing the relationships, and the AI, regulatory tech, and the AI being the technology that provides the enablement of the same. And I hope that is very clear so far. I run the risk of sounding as if I'm running a lecture in the university. I must forgive my audience that I sometimes will get carried away. But I hope what I'm saying is quite compelling so far to you. So if I took a slightly deeper dive, an even deeper dive, this is almost going into what I call blue ocean deep dive. If I take an even deeper dive into this conversation and I look at a utility outage during a storm, and you know, we are in a region where we face hurricanes, where we also have earthquakes to now to deal with in more significant ways. But let me use a case study of a storm. If you have an AI-powered outage prediction and communication system, probably I could stop the presentation right there and let your minds imagine for a moment what I mean by that. Now, the situation here is that you have a severe storm approaching. We all know about that in this region. I don't have to explain that to anyone here once they are from this region, and even those who visit our region. A severe storm is approaching the region and you know, served by a utility company. High winds and heavy rainfall are expected. You and I know for a fact when that happens, this could lead to power outages. What if by applying the regulatory AI solution models into this, the utility company is able to predict and forecast certain types of outages? We can apply the machine learning models in these generator tools to analyze weather data, historical outage patterns, and grid conditions. That is the type of thinking that I would extend to us to start looking at. The application of the AI algorithms can predict with some distinct high level of accuracy which areas are probably likely to be the greatest zonal risk of losing power within a storm. All right, that's a very important point there. Well, based on that argument, applying what I've just discussed in terms of customer engagement, this is one way the case study could be applied. Advanced notification can be provided, of course. You know, so it's not just advanced notification that we're having a storm, but advanced notification to the customers of the utility services that are being supported by AI-driven automated systems to send such alerts, emails, and push notifications generally to customers in the affected areas. Now, if the storm, based on its trajectory and prediction, will affect certain areas more than others, based on sometimes the trajectory of those storms or hurricanes, then the alignment that could be made there is to provide those customers with that particular type of information. Notwithstanding the whole country may need it, but you can provide those that are likely to be more affected based on the analysis that is provided. This in of itself will enable us to have a likelihood reduction in terms of indicating to persons, well, okay, this is what you expected outage to be. Please prepare accordingly, because we cannot stop natural disasters, but we can help to minimize and mitigate the risk if we have the technology being applied well. Resource allocations can also be qualified by using the AI in this regard, in terms of the manage and dispatch of repair crews in certain particular zones. These are the type of things that we need to be harnessing around the technology. And listen, the technology exists for us to do this here. So in other words, I'm just contextualizing it locally and regionally as to what are some things that we should be thinking about. Real-time updates during the outage and use of the AI-powered chatbots as virtual assistants to, you know, provide such update to customers. Customers can then use that information to inquire about repairs, estimated restoration times. I'm going to use a language that is much simpler for persons to understand. In technical terms, sometimes we say mean time between failure and responses, but in simple English, it's estimated restoration time. Safety tips through the chat or voice interfaces that are provided by this regulatory AI. So feedback collection is also possible. So the AI systems can collect feedback from customers without about their particular outage experience and the utilities response, equally, utilities response. And in this regard, the information helps the utility to make the type of emergency response efforts that should be put in place. So that's one scenario. Second final scenario is that of billing and complaints. If you think about billing and complaints, and I chose these two because they are very endemic to our space. If we can apply the AI-powered chatbots for billing and customer support, the utility company, as we know, this is a scenario, the situational scenario, the utility company receives a high volume of billing inquiries and complaints from its customers. Many of these inquiries are routine, I would say, for many of the time, just listening for what I see when I go into some of the utilities myself, or what you hear on radio when persons complain on the various hotlines. And this could be resolved quickly with accurate information and quick responses. If you incorporate an AI solution into this framework, the utility implements those AI-powered chatbots to handle customer inquiries and complaints, from FAQs, customer service protocols, billing processes, based on what the utilities are doing. And in this case, we can train the bot. We can train the bot to equally respond to these things, right? Of course, the customer engagement piece will be significant in that there's 24/7 availability based on the virtual bots that are being run, quick and accurate responses that can be engendered here. In that context, the common billing information can be quickly responded to by the bot, providing the various payment options they may have, or just some common concerns such as high bills or discrepancies that may occur on some bills. So the issue resolution now is clear. For more complex issues, the chatbots can initiate a certain type of resolution ticket. Let's call them a resolution ticket for a particular process, and you may schedule that. Accordingly. Now, in the context of meter readings, those scheduled meter readings are connecting customers to human agents where necessary, because there might be some level of discrepancy that the bot may not be able to respond to, that will now require the intervention of the human agent. But at least this type of transparency will be very helpful based on this scenario. And then feedback gathering after the interaction, the AI can prompt the customers for feedback on their chatbot experiences. This is something that our society is going through a cultural transformation with. Again, I say the pandemic was never a good thing, but the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is that it forced many of us to have to go through this type of radical transition. So the chatbot experiences, you may be able, by virtue of responding to that, the utility company can now identify the areas for improvement in its own customer services. Of course, these use cases are not only applicable to utilities, but there are several other use cases and other industries, I should say, that for which we could apply these use cases. So these case studies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues that are here, these case studies and scenarios illustrate how AI can play this very pivotal role in enhancing the customer engagement in the context of utility regulation in our region. AI not only helps utilities operate more efficiently, as I've said before, it will also empower customers by providing very timely and accurate information and resolving issue tickets, which ultimately strengthens the the customer advocacy or the utility customer relationship that we need to be seeing. In a sense, as I conclude my conversation with you on this regulatory AI and compliance in our local context in this region, is to suggest that the AI regulatory technologies provides for improved customer experiences and efficiency that clearly will typify the type of opportunities that I'm sure the OUR and all other regulators in this region and its regulated stakeholders that benefit from the regulator deserve. There are several tools out there that have been designed already to be providing a variance of these services. I can think of IBM Watson's tools. I can think of IBM compliance, regulatory analytics. There's Quantexa. There's Nice Activity. There are so many. And there's H-Data that I am learning about today, which I'm thankful to the presenter for that. But there's so many that are there. What we are not finding with the adoption of any specific technology that is already out there is sometimes the one that is one that can be customized to our specific context. And that is where I think the work is, the customization of the regulatory AI tools to serve our specific ecosystem, or specific regulatory intelligence community, as I like to call them. This in itself, by the way, is a new and emergent community, at least for us here in Jamaica and the region. And hence, as I conclude, this is a call to action to encourage us to grow this together. Thank you for your time. And if there are any questions and you want to reach me after this, feel free to do so. I am now open to any questions from the floor, and I defer to the moderator to guide accordingly. Thank you all, colleagues.
Professor Thorpe, another thought-provoking, very engaging presentation. Listeners and viewers, if you didn't catch his presentation yesterday, please go on our OUR TV YouTube channel and watch it. It's really, really very thought-provoking, gave a lot of food for thought. Certainly I thought, and he has a way of just breaking down issues that, it brings it close to home. Certainly, again, he was right on point today when he mentioned the number of areas within the regulatory and the customer service sphere that where we can harness the AI technology. So AI is not just about asking ChatGPT or Bard, for example, to write an essay for you or to write some report for you, but certainly he has given some present-day scenarios in terms of how we can leverage AI into our various workspaces, and some futuristic presentations as well, in customer engagement, in the monitoring and evaluation and auditing of the utilities that we regulate and so on. Records management, enforcement. You really gave some insight as to the possibilities that can exist, because they have a saying, if the mind can conceive it, you can achieve it, kind of thing. If you have any questions for Prof, please feel free to put them in the YouTube or Facebook chat. But Prof, I want to probe a bit more on, the whole issue of trust. And I'm going back to our own Director of IT and Risk, Leighton Hamilton, when he spoke earlier in his opening remarks. He said, there were some concerns about AI, especially when it came to data protection. And is that, I know it's a real concern, but I still wanted to raise it, and how we can mitigate, especially as a country where we will be putting in place or enacting our Data Protection Act in another month or so.
Right. So my expectation, and thank you for the question. Again, thank you for the opportunity of sharing with your public. What I'm seeing here as the clear next step as it relates to the arguments of the trust is the need to understand what the regulations will be coming with. I'm sure Dr. Dana Dixon and her team, who is also the lead under the AI task force, I mean, in government, they will be putting together a set of responses in terms of how the regulation will manifest itself. I figure why we have so many questions today is that those regulations are not yet available. They should be available, from what I understand, based on the general press, in another 2 or 3 weeks. Now that will be seen for us to do another analysis, but I'm sure there'll be provisions there to speak to the same. Jamaica does not have an AI Act, and while we could go and argue for one, a lot of what we do in the region will be based on what happens in the EU, but the provision will be such that you and I know that artificial intelligence is not human. You can't charge it for anything. And therefore, it comes down to the responsibility of the agents of the state that uses the AI and needing to use the AI responsibly. What I can't say at this moment to the public is what the government's position is relating to the regulations and the penalties if there are breaches to such regulation. I have to yield and wait to hear myself what is the specifics where that is concerned. But what I can say authoritatively is that there is a significant responsibility on the part of the provider. So if the OUR is providing AI-related services, there'll be a need for heightened responsibility in how you provide those services, and all stakeholders who also use those services. I think that's where the conversation will have to go in terms of understanding where the lines of responsibility and accountability should be drawn.
For sure. Talk, I'm not keeping you for much longer. We're over our allocated time. But
it's an exciting segment, man. 2 days of it, great stuff.
Yes, and we did talk quite a bit yesterday about the various aspects in our Q&A segment. But I must probe a bit more because Hudson Hollister, who was here earlier from H Data, and you both spoke to the possibilities of AI. He spoke about structured and unstructured data analysis coming together.
Yes.
You spoke specific to a regulatory environment, but I want to probe a bit more, Prof, in general terms, not specific to regulatory AI per se, but in general terms, what's the future of AI now? Because you already said yesterday that we're 10 years ahead of the game.
Yes.
And your mind seems to be stretching for limitless possibilities, as it must.
Yes.
What's the future you see of AI that we have not tapped into as yet now?
Okay, so let me give you some examples that I have in mind. The next time you put out a job advert, possibly it could be that you need an AI regulatory analyst as a part of the OUR workforce, an AI regulatory analyst. Okay, so let's start there. Another component of what I see happening next is that within companies or organizations, you will have an AI unit or an AI office as a part of the transformation. In my department and my faculty of engineering and computing, we have created a digital transformation unit that looks into these things very specifically. The job descriptions are being defined as we put them together as we speak. So in other words, we are all here on a journey together where we will be defining, for example, not only the AI job descriptions for the new workforce, but we're also defining the fact that you'll have offices that are clearly demarked as AI operational offices within the entities. But we are also needing to create an ecosystem of working groups and communities that respond to various stakeholder issues. So it could be a call to action now that the OUR has a regulatory AI working group. And this regulatory AI working group is a working group that seeks to understand the regional issues, not just here in Jamaica, but regionally, about how we can continue to look at the application of AI within our social space and within our workplace, and how the utilities should be interpreting that as a part of its application. So there are so many facets of thinking that you have to start looking at in terms of training persons, the employer of using the regulatory AI, actually putting in offices, and you, the OUR, putting in your own units that align to where this vision can be going.
Prof, the conversation continues. I don't have to.
Yes, it does.
We can probably do it for the next couple of weeks, and we still have so many areas that we haven't tapped into. I don't know how to thank you. It has been really, really very good. Suffice it to say that we will talk.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So it's left for me, ladies and gentlemen, to say my thank yous as we wrap up our awesome 2-day workshop looking at unlocking the power of AI, shaping the future of utilities regulation. I really hope you found it as informative as I did today and as well yesterday. As we wrap up, please allow me to thank the following persons who have been so invaluable to the contribution and success of our 2 days of workshop. Our Director of IT and Risk, Leighton Hamilton, who gave his opening remarks today, and he says there's a healthy skepticism for AI, which he feels is grounded mainly in concerns about data protection and privacy. But he says those can be harnessed with effective regulation and tools. We want to thank Leighton for being a part of this presentation today. Leslie Lee Fook joined us from Incus Services in Trinidad and Tobago, where he gave key examples of how we can introduce automation into customer service in the various fields in which we operate. It was really very informative. I don't know about you, but I learned quite a bit about Hudson Hollister, the founder of Age Data in the United States. His presentation provided very key insights into regulatory AI. My takeaways from it: generative AI can make life easier for us here in utilities regulation, and the future of AI in regulation is combining structured and unstructured data analysis. And of course, I learned about trunkification. Professor Sean Thorpe, Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Computing at the UTech in Jamaica, he again shared with us, and this time it was on a local perspective on compliance, strategy, and customer engagement using AI. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I must say a big thank you to our Director General, who not only came on yesterday to give welcome, but also logged in for the first section of this workshop today as well, because he found it so interesting, and such was the level and depth of his support for this initiative undertaken by the OUR's Information Center. And she's behind the scenes, but her contribution to the development and execution of our week of activities, and this is part of our Library and Information Week of Activities, and I speak of no other person than our own Director of Consumer and Public Affairs, under which our Information Center falls, Yvonne Nicholson. Thank you so much for your guidance, your invaluable insight, and your continued support. And Colleen Mignot, our Library and Information Officer at the OUR, who was adamant that we should have these workshops as part of the activities for this week. She has been the main head cook, bottle washer, instigator, planner, executioner, everything. Thank you so much, Colleen. It was a success. Job well done. If you missed today's workshop, parts of it or all of it, head on over to the OUR's YouTube page. You can access yesterday's workshop as well as today's, the full episode. So please tell a friend or colleague about it. Don't forget to complete our feedback form. And it's just left for me to say, I am Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, the Public Education Specialist here at the Office of Utilities Regulation. Thanks again for joining us, and take care.